In this video, we're going to discuss a couple of factors that are going to affect alveolar gas exchange. To understand these factors, two things that we need to remind ourselves about the respiratory membrane. We said the respiratory membrane is very thin, so somewhere between 0.5 to 1 micrometers. That allows for an effective gas exchange. And number two, it has a large surface area, right? So about 70 to 100 square meters if we were to count all the alveoli in both lungs. So we're going to look at how the changes in the thickness and surface area of the respiratory membrane is going to affect alveolar gas exchange. And we're going to look at two factors. So there are many other things that are going to affect alveolar gas exchange, but we'll concentrate on an increase in thickness for the respiratory membrane, and we're going to look at the decrease in surface area. So let's start with an increase in thickness. And there are many conditions that are going to increase the thickness of a respiratory membrane, but we're going to use pneumonia as an example. So we know that pneumonia is an inflammatory condition. And during inflammation, as discussed in our inflammatory topic, we know that blood vessels will dilate, they will become more permeable, and as they become more permeable, we have an exudate that enters the tissues and tends to accumulate in the tissues, right? So we're going to write here, in pneumonia due to inflammation, we have fluid accumulation. So the question is, where is this fluid accumulating? Well, it's accumulating in the connective tissue that separates the alveolus from the pulmonary capillaries, right? So I'm going to use this black color. Remember, we talked about the structures of the respiratory membrane, and I'm just going to keep making it thicker. Okay. So how is that going to affect gas exchange? We know that in the alveolus, CO2, or in the alveolar gas exchange, CO2 is unloaded and oxygen is loaded. But now the respiratory membrane has become thicker, and what that means is that less oxygen is going to diffuse into the blood and less carbon dioxide is going to diffuse out. And in terms of partial pressures, it is going to result in low partial pressure of oxygen in the blood, right? Because we have less oxygen diffusing in. So partial pressure of oxygen in the blood, sorry, let me capital letter. So partial pressure of oxygen in blood is going to decrease. And what's going to happen to partial pressure of carbon dioxide in blood? Partial pressure of carbon dioxide in blood, it is going to increase. So we have an insufficient gas exchange. It is low, right? I'm going to write here low gas exchange, because this diffusion of gases is affected and we have less oxygen in the blood and we have more carbon dioxide in the blood. This low concentration of oxygen in the blood is known as hypoxemia. And we know that we need enough oxygen to deliver to the tissues, so our tissues will eventually be affected. High concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood can lead to pH imbalances. And one of those imbalances, so if we are accumulating CO2 and CO2 is a source of hydrogen, it can lead to respiratory acidosis. So an increase in the thickness of a respiratory membrane is going to lead to a low concentration of oxygen in blood and high concentration of carbon dioxide with potential changes in the pH. So what how thick? Okay, what should the thickness of the respiratory membrane be for us to start seeing this low gas exchange? And we know that normally is between 0.5 to 1, so really we're talking about an increase in thickness over 3 micrometers.